All right, y'all. So we just had the Biden press conference. And long story short, homie is cooked. He is mega cooked. He is barbecued, deep fried, broiled, boiled. Any word you can come up with that denotes some form of cooking, he was put in the waffle iron and the toaster and 74 other, the convection oven, the air fryer, every kind of thing you could think of that could cook something. That's what happened. Okay, so now this was viewed as a last-ditch effort for him to sort of save himself from the bad press, everything everybody's been saying post-debate, to save himself from all the Democrats who are jumping ship, and he failed the test miserably. So first of all, before I get to the actual Q&A, earlier today, there was the first Democratic congressperson to come out and say, not only should Biden stop running, he should also resign as president. Oh, that's devastating. Okay, so we have that. There's also apparently dozens of Democrats who, regardless of how the press conference went, they were going to go ahead with dropping a letter saying that Biden should resign. If anything, I would say the press conference made it worse. It didn't make it better. Nobody else is going to come out and say, oh, I changed my mind after the press conference. No, if anything, more people will join the dozens who are going to call for him to step down. So, all right, let's go through some of this stuff. So earlier in the day at the NATO summit, we already had a gaffe from Biden. We already had a gaffe. So he was trying to introduce President Zelensky of Ukraine, and he called him President Putin. Guys, in liberal circles, that's sort of like accidentally introducing somebody as President Adolf Hitler. Like, this is what we're talking about here. So that was a big deal. The media was all over that as soon as that happened. And again, this is before we got to the press conference. So then we get to the press conference. Now, he gave a little speech first. The speech was passable. It was okay, as much as Biden can be okay these days. As long as he's on the teleprompter and he doesn't veer off, he's okay, right? But then we got to the Q&A, and it was an epic disaster. So first of all, he does a lot of coughing. He's got that low, raspy voice. He talked really slowly, and as the Q&A went on, he got more and more slow. He was sort of wandering with his sentences, and he had the sort of glazed over dead eyes where nothing's going on inside there. So the optics of it, the vibes of it were just F-. But then, of course, the biggest gaffe of the night, let me stop burying the lead here. When trying to talk about Vice President Kamala Harris, he said, Vice President Trump. He called Kamala Harris Vice President Trump. So we got Zelensky being called Putin and Kamala being called Trump. And this is all on the day that he's supposed to bring his A+ game to let everybody know, hey, dog, I'm good. You don't have to worry about it. By the way, there were some cameras that were on the faces of his top aides as he said, Vice President Trump. And, oh, you could tell their hearts dropped. Their hearts dropped. In their minds, they were like, homie's cooked. It's a wrap. It's over. What are we doing here? We're donezo. So, I mean, look, I'm seriously thinking at this point, if they can't get him to willingly step aside, I think we might be at the point where the Democrats would try a convention coup against him, or maybe even some 25th Amendment shit. Like, that's where we're at right now. That's how bad it was. So those were the two biggest gaffes of the day. The introducing President Putin when it was Zelensky and calling Kamala Vice President Trump. But there were other things too. So during the course of the event, he had a list of reporters who he was, telling him to go ahead, ask your question, right? And he forgot, after he would tell somebody to ask him a question and he would answer it, he would often forget what he's doing and where he is and just sort of stand there awkwardly for 5 seconds. Then he would have to remember and shake himself back into reality and go, oh, right, yeah, Associated Press reporter, you go ahead and ask. So super awkward. It really does feel like looking at grandma or grandpa and trying to take the car keys from them finally. You could tell he still thinks he's there, but he's just not there anymore. Not nearly as much as even in 2019. 2019, he had gaffes, but it wasn't this bad. He didn't look this bad. So those moments were super awkward. There were a few times where a reporter would ask a question and be like a two-part question. And I would always go, oh no, don't ask two questions. Don't ask two questions. He's going to forget the second one. Every single time he forgot the second one and they had to repeat it. That was a guarantee. The second they asked a two-part question, I looked at Crystal and said, they can't do that. He's not going to remember the second one. And every single time he didn't remember the second one. So he was also asked about why he changed his position about, I'm going to be a bridge to the next generation of Democratic leaders. And he basically gave a Trumpian answer. Trump's whole thing is, only I can do it. And Biden basically said, only I can do it. He was like, hey, I have all this experience in the Senate, and I know all these world leaders, and so that's why I'm the one, and basically, only I can do it. And at one point in that answer, he loses his train of thought, and he hit us with the classic Biden, anyway. And then the later the event went, the more the anyway count went up. There had to be at least 6 or 7 anyways where he would cut himself off and go on to something else because he lost his train of thought. A couple other noteworthy points. At one time, people on Twitter were citing this one. At one point, he said, quote, my numbers are better in Israel than they are here. Well, gee, Joe, that seems bad. Why do you think that is? Isn't this avoidable? Don't you think you should do something to have this not be the case? So that's embarrassing. He also, at one point in the Q&A, randomly started screaming. Like the entire time, he's slow, low voice, rambly. And then at one random time, he starts screaming at the top of his lungs about gun control out of nowhere. He said this one line, control guns, not girls. I mean, I think he's trying to allude something like, hey, do gun control, but stop cracking down on abortion. I think that's what he's getting at, but it just came across as like very awkward. There's another quote he had was, do you think democracy isn't under siege with this court? And that one stuck with me because it's like, dude, what are you doing about it? You've proposed nothing in terms of policy. You haven't said anything. You have no plan. Like, hey, here's how we're going to reign in the court. You haven't done anything. So yeah, I think democracy is under siege with the court, but you're not doing anything about it. So why would you even have that line? And also, if the court is such a danger, you need to step aside so we have a Democrat who has an actual chance of beating Trump so the court doesn't get worse. So that line stuck with me. Another point, which I think could be consequential here, is he was asked a question about, basically a convention coup. And he goes, look, man, my delegates are free to do whatever they want. He said, my delegates are free to do whatever they want, but that's not going to happen. They're going to stick with me, and I have overwhelming support. Nah, homie, you really, really, really don't. All the Democrats know you're dragging down the ticket. They hate it. They're ready to pull you, man. They're ready to pull you. So the fact that he said they could do whatever they want, and he even said at one point, that's democracy for them to do whatever they want. Okay, all I'm saying is you asked for it. You asked for it in that scenario. So we also have, he goes full Trump at another point and does total poll denialism. He said, quote, how accurate does everybody think the polls are these days? The campaign hasn't even started yet. Number one, the campaign absolutely positively has started. Number two, even if you think the polls aren't perfectly accurate and they're a little off, you're still losing big time, right? Like, that's the point. Even if you think they're off, and even if you think there's a secret Biden vote and there's fewer people are pro-Trump than it looks like in the polls, you are still losing in that scenario. It is not close right now. Let's be clear. There was an article that came out the other day that said New York is even in play in certain respects, like certain districts that were like plus 10 pro-Biden districts. They could go Republican. Republicans are up in some of those districts now, right? Wisconsin, he's down. Biden is down in Wisconsin. A Democrat has to win Wisconsin in order to have any chance. So just straight poll denialism, super Trumpian. At another point, this is just a flat out lie. He goes, hey, money raised, we're not doing bad. There were like 14 stories about big money Democrat donors who were like, we're done here, we're done. Abigail Disney came out and said that. A number of others came out and said that. That George Clooney article, he talked about other Democrats who say the same thing as him behind the scenes in terms of Biden's not up to doing this, and other donors it's just drying up, both the big money and the small money donors. So that's just a flat out fucking lie. And then finally, at the end of it, he was asked about earlier in the press conference when he called Kamala Vice President Trump. And the question was like, hey man, Trump is like already pouncing on you for this, making fun of you, making fun of your age, making fun of your mental state, because you called Kamala Vice President Trump. Like, in this very press conference, you're kind of fucking yourself and proving that you're wrong about the fact that you can continue. And Biden's response to that was, he paused, he smiled, and he said, listen to him. He was asked about Trump making fun of him, and his response is, listen to him. I literally don't know what that means. What does that mean? That's not clever. That's not witty. So anyway, look, bottom line is this. Dozens of Democrats are going to come out and drop a letter and say he's got to step aside. And that's probably going to be more, if I had to guess, after this press conference. That's what I would say. So this did not quell the narrative at all. The conversation is as hot as it ever was. And really, honestly, it's a rare instance where I think a lot of people are cheerleading Obama and Pelosi and Democratic elites to sort of either talk sense into him and get him to step down, or honestly to do a convention coup or to invoke the 25th Amendment or something. Because I think Democrats feel like if he is as bad as he looks right now, and the numbers are as bad as they look right now, he's capsizing the entire ship. We're all going down with him. We cannot have that happen. So in a weird way, their like careerism is leading them to this perspective, that they're trying to save their own ass desperately by getting rid of him. So right now, even with Biden being super duper obstinate and saying, I'm 100% staying, that's the end of the conversation. What are my odds? I would put it at, I got to go 60-40 that he's got to drop one way or the other. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to be the 25th Amendment. I don't know if it's going to be a convention coup. I don't know if they'll convince him he's got to go and he's just reasonably steps down. I don't know. But now I have it at 60% he drops, 40% he stays. Because again, this was a disaster. And we just cannot do this every day until the election. We just can't do it. Every time he opens his mouth, it's anxiety, it's depression, it's fear. It's, what is he going to say next? And look, this is having real world consequences when it comes to policy, too. As I've told you guys, the fact that he's feeble and weak and no longer with it, like, I think this is allowing somebody like Netanyahu to absolutely roll him in a way that he couldn't have back if it was like 2012 Biden, right? I don't think Biden would have been this much of a green light for brazen genocide if he had his wits about him. And the number of times Netanyahu has directly defied him and humiliated him, 2012 Biden wouldn't have taken that. Now he doesn't have the ability to have a backbone and stand up and fight back because he's not with it enough mentally. So, anyway, there you have it. Disastrous night. I'm interested to see the spin because I've already seen some people on Twitter say, like, this is sort of like the Stephanopoulos interview where he didn't do any more harm, but he didn't make it better. That's what I see some people saying. I disagree. I think he made it way, way worse. Namely because of calling Zelensky Putin and calling Kamala Vice President Trump. I think that with all the other stuff going on, just those two instances alone, even if everything else was perfect, those are the headlines. That's what everybody's going to be talking about. And again, it's an absolute disaster for him.